Ah, the French champagne.
Champagne!
The schlocky movie from this week may be the schlockiest film we've ever seen on this podcast.
I'm Mr. Pink.
Sis Blue.
So Miranda hasn't seen Reservoir Dogs.
Those men's children are all identical clones of Adolf Hitler.
Once they were men, now they are land crabs.
Amanda Bynes is a national treasure.
There's like a bunch of other shit that happens in Driven.
Is there?
Secret Nazis.
Yeah.
Secret Nazis.
Big Daddy lost his eagle.
I hope
So-
no one from my family listens to this podcast.
The Citizen Kane of the week is...
Hey everyone, welcome. This is another one of our Podlet series episodes where we tackle the important questions that you're all wondering about what is good film, what make good film good, and when film is good, how no good. And we aim to answer those questions today. Right, everyone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I still hold firm that the aim of these podlets is to completely remove the subjectivity from art.
Yeah. That's our goal.
I would like that to be our tagline, Jack.
Yeah.
If you can shoehorn that into your intros.
Welcome back to the CKVS Podlet, where subjectivity in art comes to die.
Yeah,
How's that?
that's good.
Where objectivity reigns supreme.
Ooh.
Yeah. There is only one way.
Yeah, this is good.
Yep.
I'm really into this.
Vote for... Is it a political
Yeah,
thing?
no, well, no one's given us money to, but
Oh, okay,
eventually, some candidate will give us money, and we're gonna say their name a lot. So get
Sweet.
ready for that.
Doesn't matter who it is.
Doesn't matter who it is. Give us
First-
the fucking stacks.
First one to call.
You're in.
Ford, I'm looking at you, buddy.
Buddy-o. He would
friends?
call, apparently that's his thing.
Buddy-o, you big
So
fat
hi,
bitch.
welcome. My name is Jack Rennie. I'm skipping over this, and I'm joined by my two idiot friends. One over there,
I'm Sean Jacqueline.
and the other...
Idiot Dan.
Dummy Dan.
Dummy Dan.
Dumb. Danny Dumb. So we thought we would also do some podlets on some of the categories that we use to rate movies, and we've gone through a lot of these.
So we're gonna talk about Wild Card today.
Yeah, we're talking about the wild card thing we did for a season. No, we are not going to talk about that. Although we could talk about rewatchability in the future. I think it is worth... We made a point of that being a
Yeah.
category of its own.
I
That
miss it.
lasted 3 minutes, didn't it?
No, it lasted 3 seasons.
Did we keep...
Yeah.
Oh, we
a full
made it a category for a season. It wasn't 3 seasons.
But it was around a lot.
It was around a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nobody
Well,
knows.
no.
There's no way of checking.
No way of
one's-
knowing. I don't look back in the feed.
No.
And no one listens to this podcast. so-
Correct. But if you are listening to this episode, it's because you thought it would be interesting to hear our insightful thoughts on what makes story good in film, in cinema. This is a cinema podcast, so you might have your own thoughts about what makes story good in book, but this not about that. Although they're similar. This about movie.
This bout movie. Long form visual drama and comedy.
And action.
I would say movies
And
are.
action.
I would say movies are short form.
But movies are the original long form.
Correct.
Right.
But now they're the short.
Well, I guess
They are the
books are
short
the
form.
original long form. But of the visual medium.
Nerd.
Licked my taint.
I mean, we both know that I will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, essentially, like when we talk about story on the podcast, there are a couple things that come up that I think are where I would jump to first, which is like one, like Dan, one of your favorite things to bring up is just like premise,
Yeah.
like the sort of not quite even the originality of it, but just like is the base idea interesting? Is the core of why they're doing it interesting?
Totally, yeah. I like to think of it in
Open a
terms of
beer.
like. I like to think of it in terms of like, what is the log line? Does it sound like a movie that I'd be interested in seeing? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and like novelty matters.
Totally.
When you're-
if
yeah.
it's clever novelty, because there's novelty like Sharknado,
Yeah.
Yeah,
which is like but then there's novelty like The Evil Dead, which is like equally as not equally as silly, but like silly in its own right for sure.
So what when you see a preview for a movie, you have no knowledge of this movie, or a friend is like, you got to see this movie. It's like this. What is the thing that makes you go, I will watch that?
It's different every time, man. I have no idea. I don't watch trailers because I think that trailers nowadays are almost always bad and are never a really good reflection of what the movie's actually going to be.
I do yearn for the days of like, he was a guy, she was a girl, and they meet at a coffee shop.
But like that, those were the days where the trailer really did give you like a preview of the movie. Now trailers,
It's a separate movie.
Trailers are separate movies. Trailers show you all the best parts of the movie.
Yeah.
But like crafting a trailer now is its own editing art.
Yeah.
Right. So like it isn't even meant to really show you what the movie is going to be. It's just meant to get you excited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's never a good reflection of what the movie's going to be.
I mean, as an example, I'll use the fucking show you recommended we just watched, which is a TV show, but still in the medium of like Severance,
So good.
where
So good.
it like has this core premise, which this isn't spoiling anything. It's the premise of the show, which is that people can, you hear this, I think you told me about it, and like, yeah, the core premise is people can separate their memories into kind of work life and their life outside of work.
Yeah.
Like they split it and they're two different people essentially. And I was like, that's neat.
Yeah.
I want to see what someone does with that.
Yeah.
And like that's enough to make me curious. Doesn't mean that the show will be good after that, you know. And sometimes shows have like a premise that you're like you'd be like, I think like the core premise of like Breaking Bad isn't anything to like be amazed by, but then you see it and it's like so good.
I don't know if that's a good example. I mean, the Breaking Bad's premise is pretty. It's. I mean, because
A
the
chemistry teacher
no, but
starts cooking. You're like, all right,
yeah, but like the actual premise, the intention of that show, if you hear Vince Gilligan talk about it, is to bring, I think it was Mr. Rogers or Mr. Chips to Scarface. Like that's the show you're watching, right?
fair, okay.
So like knowing that that's the journey you're going on, that is a much more kind of enticing thing. I agree. Like, but even a high school chemistry teacher.
I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it doesn't do the whole show service.
No, it doesn't. But I don't know how you would with that show because that show is fucking incredible and in so many unexpected ways. But I mean, it's the premise thing is just one piece of the puzzle because I find that I usually bring that argument up when it is up against when the movie is up against another movie that is like lacking in the story department. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Or like one of these movies we've watched that like doesn't really have much of a story.
Yep.
And then my argument is usually, well, this one's story wasn't great, but the premise was still strong. There was still like a kernel of a story there.
I think about movies like Iron Sky.
Yeah.
Where
what a premise.
You know,
interesting premise
where
for
they're
sure.
leaning
Moon
on
Nazis.
The moon Nazis. And you go, if you hear like, yeah, there's an entire base of Nazis that have been living on the dark side of the moon, and you're like, go on.
Yeah.
But
similarly, Boys from Brazil. There are what was it? 164 unique clones of Adolf Hitler living somewhere in multiple places over the world.
Around the world, yeah.
Orchestrated by one maniacal former Nazi living in Brazil.
Yeah.
One thing I will say though is that if this podcast has taught me anything, it's that premises like that almost always underdeliver.
Yeah.
Like when you hear something like that, you can never actually count on it being a good movie.
Yeah.
It might be like fun and campy and entertaining in parts, but it's never going to actually be a good watchable film.
Yeah, which is something I feel like I was about to say the exact same thing, which is like with the Sharknado example you gave, where it's like an overly ambitious or silly premise can often be a sign of like likely a weak story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like it's stuff like The Wrestler, where the story is so wonderfully told and executed. But again, not that movie has a very heightened environment. It's about someone who is a semi-pro wrestler. Like that's a pretty heightened thing. But like it's just about him trying to like, you know what I mean? Like
yeah.
When a story has a really like simple premise to it, it's like a chance for, it means that the story needs to be good.
It means that there's room.
Lean on the premise.
It means that there's room if you have a simple story like The Wrestler of like man sees his chance to become great maybe again, and the pitfalls of that, it leaves a lot of room for everything else in the movie to elevate that, to take it to new heights, because you're not dealing with some like finicky premise of like guy has to go to the store, but before he gets to the store his car breaks down, so he has to ride a rhinoceros and yada yada yada.
Yeah.
Great movie, by the way.
Oh yeah, great one.
Yeah.
I also think of movies like Avatar, where people shat on that movie's writing and story so hard.
Yeah.
So to me, it's become kind of the classic divide movies of like, most people can agree the like technological presentation of that movie is amazing.
Yeah.
And people will get hung up on being like, people are like, oh, but the story was so simple. And I want to be like, it's not about the story. Like, you're watching it for the wrong thing. And
that doesn't interest me in any way.
I get that too.
Yeah.
And I know, like, it's super derivative and it's super, not even that, it's just so common denominator.
I don't need to go and watch Jim Cameron's Ego.
Well, yeah. Well, there's that stuff.
Yeah.
But the premise is so about, like, not only the tech, but then what comes with that tech and what they were trying to show us. And so the story, like, was there ever a world where it matched what they were doing? I don't know. Like, maybe, but...
Yeah, but I mean, that movie is not about story.
It's not.
And sometimes a movie doesn't have to be about story, right? Like, we see a lot of, like, thrill ride.
They're called Dan's favorite movies.
They're called Dan's favorite movies.
Dan's favorite quote-unquote movies.
They're movies. They're absolutely movies.
People were paid to be on set and be on film. Correct.
They're 100% movies.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that's, like, some movies are, you know, character-driven dramas, and some movies are like pew theme park rides.
Sure.
And both are movies, just some don't have anything to do with a good story. And that's like, in my opinion, that's fine too, as long as the other elements of the movie that the movie is about deliver.
But like, you can get the same thrill from a fun pew no story movie as you can from turning on Grand Theft Auto 5 and just like running rampage through your city and not doing any of the story missions. There's it's just like Pablum. What elevates a pew movie is having a story that you can grip into, that doesn't make you every 3 scenes be like, what the fuck? Like, I guess the action was good, but
yeah, I'm not saying that the Pablum movies are good movies.
Yeah.
I'm saying that they have a purpose or a place. They're called like popcorn flicks or something, right? Like
there's a place for Pablum.
Yeah, if you're looking for 2 hours of just like absent-minded fun, you go see one of those films.
Sure.
If you want like something heavy and thought-provoking,
you see Avatar.
You see Avatar.
You gotta go see Avatar.
Skyscraper.
You gotta see Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Oh, that's why M. Night Shyamalan directed that movie. I have no idea.
Are we gonna go see? I want to see his new one.
What's his new one?
Is it the one with Batista in it?
Knock at the Cabin.
I would go see it for Dave Batista.
Ooh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah,
I'm in.
Let's do it. It looks terrible.
D-Bow?
D-Bow-Bow.
D-Bow out there.
D-Bow-Bow.
I think of like here's the thing.
Yeah.
When a movie can combine a strong, especially when it feels really original, and it has strong visuals to back up that original premise, and the story feels good, those movies become some of the most iconic movies out there. And I think a lot of the classic movies you think of, like, I'm just like thinking of random sci-fi stuff like
Alien,
Invasion of the Body Snatchers, like even older, I'm sure had really strong visual. We haven't seen it.
Yeah.
We should put it on the pod. But like The Matrix.
Yeah.
You know, like The Matrix was this new premise that was told well in the first movie.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about the trilogy, but the first movie, like
on a rewatch, like not really.
No, but you've been inundated over the past 23 years with like that story just retold from different angles.
When The Matrix happened, it was like,
okay, sure,
you know,
sure.
And like I know Sean wants to do a whole other pod on this, but like Star Wars, as a great example. Star Wars was like a totally not original, but it was its own version of that premise told in a really strong way with good, not too flashy, Like very much everyone knows
for the time, super flashy.
For the time, yeah.
Yeah.
But like now we would look at it as like a standard hero's journey.
Oh, you mean the story?
Yeah, like the writing of it and all that kind of stuff. But like, and so it became this iconic thing because it wasn't just a popcorn flick. Because there were parts of those original trilogy that...
Jaws is the first blockbuster because it gives you those cheap thrills, but also is like an insanely good story.
Yeah.
I rewatched that a couple months ago. It was just on TV randomly at Aaron's
so good.
mom's place. What a beautiful film.
So good.
But the subsequent films are terrible, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Spielberg didn't
Isn't
have
there like
anything to do
5
with
of them?
Probably.
Yeah.
We should really get them on too as well.
Jaws 5, The Cavity.
Well, you know, on that note,
that.
let's take a quick little break. Maybe we'll have an ad here. Otherwise, I'll just start talking again in a second. We'll see. I want to hold the mic up to your cat eating her wet food real bad. It sounds a bit better than that, actually.
Yeah.
So aside from premise, like premise is one thing. I think we talk about premise. When we think of good writing, and maybe we can think of movies that exemplify this.
Hobbs and Shaw.
What are we talking about? Hobbs and Shaw, of course.
Again, there are so many different versions of a well-written movie. It's hard. I mean, like, I don't know. Like, character development is important. Knowing who your main character is important. Some kind of character arc is important. Like basic storytelling elements, right?
A common example for this is the Star Wars prequels.
Sure.
Where it's like, who are those movies about? Like, you know, the first one, it's hard to tell.
No.
Or
Obi-Wan.
We just watched a movie. What's the last one we watched? Noah. Noah's a good example. I had zero idea who any of those characters were.
Yeah.
After 2.5 hours of runtime.
Except for Noah.
Except for Noah. Noah.
Well, the movie, but titular character has a bit of an assist.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, like, I think that there are basic kind of fundamental things in story that don't necessarily need to be there, but probably should.
Yeah.
But then there are movies that I'm trying to think of an example, because there are definitely movies that like don't have typical storytelling elements that are still exceptional.
2001: A Space Odyssey.
No.
Beautiful story.
It's what is the story in 2001: A Space Odyssey?
The story is about man's yearning for more and coming up against it as they expand out into space.
I hate everything you just said. That movie's such garbage.
So someone that I would say, for me, and this is someone that I would recommend as a screenwriter, but also as a playwright, who does this quite well, is Martin McDonagh.
Oh, yeah. We saw his latest.
Yeah. Went over my head.
I haven't seen Banshees yet.
It's fun.
But like 3 Billboards is a very good movie.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the kind of movie where it's full of what I like about his works, for example, is it isn't just totally rooted in like, it has a lead, it has a protagonist in it, but also has clear other characters that have like drive, ambition, are like fleshed out well. So when you watch a movie like 3 Billboards, it's clearly the protagonist is what's the actor, the
Frances McDormand.
Frances McDormand. Yeah, thank you. But like, it's not like everyone else is just like accessories.
They all have their own arcs that resolve either well or poorly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And like the writing is interesting and not like so on the nose. Like I still remember scenes from that, like with her and there's like a priest or something, and she pushes back, and there's this like good scenes where there are really carefully crafted moments that are left out for us to like, the scene works if we get the little part that wasn't said.
Yeah.
Which is a hard thing to do. And there are a lot of movies that really like paste it on thick. Of like, here's what we, like a popcorn flick feels like it has to do that.
Has like spoon feed you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like if we like the expository dialogue sequences where it's like, if we don't stop this bomb from going off in 30 minutes, the world's gonna, and it's like, Great. Both of you knew that already, but thanks for saying it for us.
Yeah.
Super cute. Thank you so much.
We need to know that. And I'll say, to use McDonough as an example, the Banshees of Inisherin, which we saw, is it does all the stuff that Three Billboards does. All the characters are very, very unique. They're written to have their own voices and to have their own journeys, and there are surprise choices that the characters make that you've been led to believe they believe a certain thing, and then they make a choice, and you're like, you have grown in this moment, and you are now kind of a new person, and that's fun to watch that transformation. But also what McDonough does is he takes this story of two men their friendship falling apart very suddenly and for seemingly no reason at all, and at the chaos and destruction that it wreaks on the community around them when these two longtime friends cease to be friends anymore, and nobody really knows why. And he sets it in a small rural Irish location in the midst of the Civil War in the early 20s. So you are hearing the war happening in the background as the the partisans are fighting against the I don't know the forces in the Civil War. I'm poor on my Irish history, but you're hearing brother killing brother while you have this little story of two friends falling out. And as that escalates, you also hear the conflict escalating in the background, and little bits like that where you can raise the action of what's being written just subtly through background stuff. McDonough's so good at.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm not super familiar with Martin McDonagh's a lot of his movies, but another writing team that comes to mind that doesn't really fit this, but kind of highlights another version of interesting storytelling is the Coen brothers.
Oh yeah,
whose version is very different, and sometimes, like your favorite movie, Hail
Caesar, baby,
doesn't have any story at all.
Fuck off.
What?
The story is about the struggles of Hollywood execs and stars in the early 50s.
Okay, but what is the story? It's not what it's about. It's what is the story? What is the through line? What is the, like, if you were to write me a log line, it wouldn't be highlighting the struggles of execs in the early 20s. You would say
early
50s, whatever. You would say, I forget what the movie's actually about, but the lead character goes through or discovers this and has to go through this. What is it?
It is about, it's about a single Hollywood executive trying to hold his studio together through the personalities that exist within it.
That doesn't sound like a story.
It is a story.
No, but it sounds...
Chemistry teacher needs to make meth because he has cancer.
I guess you're right. I guess you're right. I forget a lot about Hail Caesar. I just remember finishing it and being like, I couldn't tell you any part of that movie or what the story was about, but it has entertainment value.
Sure does.
So, and what's the other one they do? Is it No Country for Old Men?
Yeah.
Yeah, which is like a 2-hour fucking slow burn, has a story, but very unlike a Martin McDonagh piece, where it's like super fast paced and like every step of the way the story is ever building, right?
Yeah,
that's all I got.
A kind of slow reveal. And you have people like
or Fargo's a good example too, I guess.
Fargo, yeah, of course. Like obviously, like a really popular one is Tarantino as like one of the most prominent writer directors out there, and he has a particular style, and I think that's an example where one of the things you can do in creating a strong story is have also like it's almost like having a premise, which is having a unique style,
right?
And that's and in your writing, you know what I mean. And so Tarantino likes to do these like very like they're like chapter based, you know,
homages to the films he grew up with.
Yeah, and so there's a certain people come to him because they enjoy that nostalgia.
Yeah.
Or to people that didn't grow up with it, it feels novel to them.
Yeah. David Mamet has his fast-paced, witty, hard-nosed characters that, you know, go for the confrontation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think when it comes down to, here's like the final question I would ask, which is like, which is the main question. Like, what are things, you can start with what you don't want, or what are things that you want in terms of writing? Like, it's hard to put a finger on.
Sure.
In terms of, like, story being, like, I'm talking about writing, and we're talking about story, but, like, story is the product, a lot of it, of writing, even the production, like, in terms of screenplay, It comes from the writing of it, and then things are often born from that, of these visuals and the performances and everything.
So the question is, what do we want from a story?
Yeah.
I would say nowadays, especially more than ever, the main thing I want from a story is to be surprised. I want, I don't ever want to feel like I am ahead of what I'm watching.
Yeah.
And it's hard because everything is incredibly derivative these days.
Yeah.
And that's why when these things come, what's a good example of something that kind of came out of left field? Even something like The Hangover, like
right.
when that came out, it was a sleeper cell movie because
Yeah.
that movie is wall to wall surprises, right? Like you never know what to expect.
That was like its thing. It was like, we're going to be a surprise movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
That's a good
if a film can really kind of subvert expectations and just keep me on my toes, and that could be
Except Star Wars.
Yeah.
Don't subvert any expectations with that one.
No, please,
Sorry.
please. Well, I mean, do it, but do it well.
Well, it has to be done well. It can't be a surprise for a surprise's sake.
Yeah.
But I just want to see something done well that I haven't seen before. I want to, if it is a derivative premise, put a new spin on it, give me interesting new characters. Like I crave originality more than anything in a story.
Like, you have like Parasite.
Yeah,
I think of
great
movies like
example.
Parasite.
Great example.
Jojo Rabbit for me was a movie that I was like, again, and they're rooted in things we know. I mean, Parasite less so because it was actually like a really famous, like it was a foreign film.
Right.
So just like in North America, it was like, what's this? There was nothing.
They make films in other countries?
What? Where are the people that look like me? Where am I? Am I the driver? The driver guy? Oh, I don't. I'm the rich person. I'm the rich person. Ooh, I'm the rich guy. Oh boy. Oh, that was close. But stuff like Jojo Rabbit is a movie that I thought was really wonderful and had unique takes in it. You know that this kid has an imaginary Hitler friend. You know, like it's out there. It's a bold choice.
Yep.
And I think one of the things I would say is I want a degree of boldness. It's a funny term to use, but similar to what you're saying, which is that I also can't fully get behind a script where like it's just people being like, yeah, it's crazy. I know. Like I just don't. I want a movie that in that story it pushes people to do/say
bold things,
big bold things.
Right.
Like that. I want it to feel like it goes almost just a splash above the lives that we live. I don't want too much realism. I want it to feel like I don't know, rooted in people, but bold.
Right.
That this is it's about interesting people doing interesting things.
Yeah.
That old storytelling thing.
Yeah.
Which can still be hyper real.
Yeah.
Just focusing on more extreme stories of humanity.
Yeah.
Maybe extreme is the wrong word, but heightened stories from humanity.
I would say mine is in similar with maybe both of yours, but I think of moments that I've seen that make me like go, oh yeah, that's fucking cinema. And it's always character driven moments where you see someone make a choice that is bold and it shakes the movie because of something that they are overcoming, and you are watching them have to shift who they are to overcome. And I think we haven't done any David Lean movies on this podcast, and we need to, because he's one of the like greats of all the masterpieces are his.
David Lean,
Lawrence of Arabia, Bridge Over the River Kwai, Dr. Zhivago, and his work is so character focused, and where you are introduced to these characters and you fall in love with these characters immediately because he gets the best actors to play them,
right?
And also they're written so well that you're just like, oh, I know these people intimately immediately, and then he puts them into harrowing circumstances,
right?
And they have to overcome these somehow.
That's a great, and I feel like that's kind of rounding back to a lot of what made something like Breaking Bad successful. But the characters felt like so true that we could have watched them do anything. If Walter White was like, like, the only way to get out of this is to start selling cotton candy. You'd be like, I'm down for a season 7 cotton candy salesman.
Yeah.
Like, we'd be into it.
We sell meth to kids.
Yeah. I'm trying to get, the season's about me trying to get off selling meth, and I'm just sticking to cotton candy.
One thing I'll add just on the kind of Breaking Bad comparison is, on one thing I really respected about the Breaking Bad series was that it knew when it had told its story and ended it there. Yeah. And I know, like, that is especially important in TV, but I find that in the age of, like, the average movie being 2.5 hours, what I also want from a story is less fat.
Yes.
You know, like something that is like tight, concise, because there's just so much empty space.
The two of the most popular series to come out in the last year, the Ring one, the Lord of the Rings one, and fucking Dragon one,
Game of Thrones,
the Dragon one.
Are you okay?
They were like, well, I like the
He's
Rings
acting like
one.
he doesn't know.
Yeah.
But
his favorite books.
But they both.
I'm staring at a poster of the Lord of the Rings show on his wall right now.
Yeah. If they were allowed posters.
But they both suffer tragically from having episodes that didn't need to exist, but they needed to fill out a season before they got into the good stuff next season.
That's the Walking Dead criticism that happened.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Where it was like just a bunch of filler until they got to the next like fireworks moment. Like, it was a bad formula.
It's the tragic story of Lost as well, right?
Yeah,
like Lost was meant to be like a 12-episode miniseries that then surprisingly got picked up for 5 seasons, and the writers were like, what do we do? And they obviously didn't know. So I guess also it's know what story you're telling
and tell it. Just tell that
story. Just tell that one.
I feel like we're also circling around a simple point in terms of what not to do that is hard to bring up in a critical way, as we're talking about this a bit, as we have some knowledge, which is don't bore us.
Don't be boring.
Don't be boring.
Don't be boring.
That's the ultimate trick, everyone. If you're out there writing, if you think it's interesting, if you think it's novel, if you think this character is so cool, none of that matters if it's boring.
The Room is so fucking bad, but it's not boring.
It's not boring. It's not. Dan is like shaking his head.
No, I'm just saying it's not. It is not boring.
It is not boring.
There are some like kind of there's a certain kind of Oscar bait movie that is just about being interesting and highlighting these actors. It's your Lincolns.
It's boring.
With Daniel Day-Lewis.
It's your Meet the Feldmans. What was that last movie?
Oh,
the Fablemans. The Fablemans.
Yeah.
Ugh.
I didn't see it.
The
But
Post. I saw Tar recently.
Oh yeah.
And it's like Oscar buzz this for her and all, and I'm like, it's boring. I'm not saying there isn't interesting stuff in there to discuss, like it's an essay.
Yeah.
But it's an essay on it. It's boring.
The Phantom Thread is one that comes to mind.
Phantom Thread.
Yo,
I didn't even see it, and I know.
The Phantom Thread can lick my balls. That movie was the worst.
So that's a big thing, and that's I think a thing that we circle around a lot when we talk about story that we don't say.
Yeah.
Is like, you bored us.
Yeah.
So Matrix 1 be damned. That movie is not boring. That movie is fun.
It is. No, it is. It is fun. But I would. I know how you're going to react to this, but I would compare The Matrix. I would say it is a closer comparison to a movie like Avatar than it is to a movie like, I don't know, like Get Out, or a movie with a solid story. It isn't.
Yes.
And the
yeah.
Okay.
I agree.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Because it was also a big technological thing, right?
Well, and that really, like, the reason why I say that it is disappointing on a rewatch isn't because I've been overwhelmed with similar stories or concepts in subsequent years. It's because when I remember that movie and the premise of that movie, like the questions that it poses are really interesting. And I remembered it being this movie that explores these like deep philosophical concepts about the nature of reality.
Yeah.
And then you go back and you're like, oh no, actually it is just the one question that they use as a backdrop for many pews.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Right?
some kung fu fights.
It's some kung fu fights.
Wire kung fu fights.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's just, you realize that the writing wasn't carrying it as much as the tech and the premise was.
Right. Unlike the newest one. I haven't seen it.
Yeah. Oh my god.
I haven't seen it. Apparently, it's painfully self-referential.
Yeah. So that's the ultimate thing, you know. It's okay for movies to be different stuff. If you want to see Jojo Rabbit, or if you want to see John Wick, you know, both of those are legitimate, fun viewing experiences. It's just about execute the thing that you're doing. Know what story you're writing is also a thing. Like, write the story that you're writing, and also sorry, really quickly. Also watch the movie for the story that you're watching, which is a great for me for audience members. Which is like, if you watch John Wick and you think it's dumb because you loved Schindler's List so much, like you're
I
watching.
wish John Wick was more like Schindler's List.
You know, like
Schindler's Wick.
John List.
But you're right. You're absolutely right.
Thank you.
You have to know.
You got there.
Like the movie is setting out to accomplish a certain thing, and you're there to watch that thing unfold. And if you can't appreciate what that is and you're hoping for something else, that's not really the movie's fault. Part of that is your fault for not knowing what you're getting into. I think that John Wick is also a good example of what I was talking about before, where like essentially devoid of story. That movie is a log line, and that's it, right?
Yeah.
Like it is.
Some mobsters killed a dog. He killed them back.
But it's a great fucking movie.
Yeah.
It's a great fucking movie,
fun.
and it's enough story for the movie to happen.
Yeah.
Right.
And now we're getting into where the story has ended, but they're still going.
And they're adding more story, and we're like, ugh, stop.
Jason Mantzoukas, I love you, but what's going on now?
Oh no, is he in it? The
he
newest
was
one?
in 3.
Was he? Oh.
Is 4 already come out?
Yeah.
Or is the 4 coming out?
4 is coming.
No,
Four's
I
coming.
thought 4 came out with the new Matrix movie. Didn't it come out at the same time?
I don't remember.
Did it?
I think so, man.
We'll tell you in the next podcast.
I don't know.
I've only watched 1 and 2.
Finish your point, and then we're gonna get it.
That was my point. Is that it's the same point that I was making earlier, where like story is important, but not every movie is about story. And like you guys harp on me for liking movies like, you know,
Gods of Egypt.
Gods of Egypt. That is a
terrible movie.
That is a cinematic masterpiece.
It's a terrible movie.
No, but I know it's a terrible movie.
Yeah.
Like I know it's a terrible movie, but like the Marvel movies, I'm a big fan of those. And
not the same though.
What's that?
It's Gods of Egypt is not like the Marvel movies though.
It really wants to be.
It really wants to
really
be.
wants
I'd
to be.
love to be like that.
Yeah. No, the point I'm making is not like some movies. John Wick is a good example of a Pablum movie that is slightly heightened in a very quality way. What am I hearing right now?
It's the fish.
Oh my god, I'm done with that. The fish threw me off.
Ophelia's pissed that we are not paying attention to her.
Yeah. Sorry, cat.
Listen to my fish.
Well, we hope that answered none of your questions that you didn't have.
Yeah.
But we're not trying to answer questions. We're just talking about it because it's a tricky thing, right? And we're not trying to nail it down.
What are your favorite stories?
You're asking a new question?
No, to the audience.
Oh yeah. What are your
the listener?
Yeah.
Email us
at
CitizenKaneVS at
gmail.com.
Yeah.
Or you can tweet Sean
Yeah.
at CitizenKaneVS.
Yep.
Podcast? No. CitizenKaneVS.
Yeah.
At
the Twitters.
At the Twitters. You can
Dot
tweet
Musk.
them.
Are we at Dot Musk yet?
Probably at Dot Musk by the time this airs.
Yeah.
Or
I got
you
nothing.
can phone Dan at
639
47
82
221
Zev
11
Bugles.
8 Dan. Okay.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
I'm gonna be on television.